Should we just get going? So,
Yes.
are you ready?
Yes.
Are you ready, Gary? Okay. Are you ready? Okay, you ready?
I thought it was on the phone, so Josh really kindly gave me some extra time to wash my hair.
Are you ready?
Yeah, ready as all everybody.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Julia Lawrinson, thank you so much for being here and on my little show. How are you going?
I'm very well, Josh. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, we are going to talk about your brand new book, very exciting, your memoir, How to Avoid a Happy Life. Interesting title. We'll talk about that in a minute. But can you just give our audience a bit of a background about how you got to be an author, kids author, all that sort of stuff? If you can just give a bit of a brief rundown.
Okay, so the Cook's tour of my writing career. I started publishing young adult novels in 2001, I think it was. So my first book was Obsession with Fremantle Press, and since then I've published 17 books for children and young adults. So I have been publishing all sorts of things. So last year I had my first picture book out called City of Light.
Oh, that's about Perth and John Glenn flying over, isn't it? Yeah, awesome.
Yes, it is. So I've been in the children and young adult writing space for a couple of decades now, and I've seen lots of changes. So I'm a well-published author, I guess, in terms of having had those decades of experience, but it's very different to writing a memoir. So it's a completely different thing to be doing, but the experience of having written for different audiences and different ages and all of those kinds of things was very helpful in that process.
Yeah. Okay. So with the memoir, why did you actually want to write it? Because I know there's so many people out there, they want to write a memoir. They've had an extraordinary, crazy childhood or something like that, or their life's just been really wild, and they go, I really want to write about this. Why did you want to write about yours?
Initially, I'd had other people saying to me when I'd told them a few stories about things that have happened to me, wow, you should really write a memoir about that. And I'd be like, well, but I don't, how would I even start? And then at the end of 2019, my mother died, not entirely unexpectedly, but quite quickly. And the process of working out, I guess, the grief around that and all of the things that came up with that made me think that it was time to start writing it, because writing is the way I make sense of the world. So it made sense at that point to see if I could find a way of containing all of the things that had happened to me in writing form, I guess. So through some of my writing for children and young adults, I've kind of gone into some parts of my life story or some of the things that had happened to me, just in bits and pieces, but of course they're fictionalized in those settings, and that gives you a distance, and it's quite different to writing something and saying this is actually my version of what happened. So that was really the impetus for it. It really was my mother dying. It was like, okay, it's time to do this now.
Right. So that leads me to another question. Is it about the people involved, the people that you talk about? I mean, because look, to be honest, your memoir was really extraordinary. It was constant, not disaster after disaster after disaster, but events and so many different things. It was like, is there no break for Julia in any of this? Your life was just constantly just stuff happening, and it was just incredible. So the people that you have, that you mentioned in the book, and that's the other thing, is that people go, well, I can't write about my father because he's still alive. I can't write about that. But was it because your mum had died and that was the impetus that you got, okay, I can now have that freedom to write?
I didn't consciously think that because, you know, my mum had many qualities and she was always brutally honest. That was one thing you could always say about my mother, Gwen, is that she called a spade a shovel. And and I actually, look, there's nothing in there that had she been alive, I wouldn't have felt comfortable showing her. However, having, I guess for me, not having to think about other people's, how they might think about it, it was freeing, I guess. And it made me, and I guess that's what I mean when I say that it felt like an avalanche of memories just rained down on me after she died. And I was not expecting that at all. And a lot of those memories were about really difficult stuff. And it's not like I wasn't conscious of those things before, but they just assaulted me in a way that I was not expecting at all.
Was it like,
And
was it like you had segmented off or compartmentalized some of these memories, and then with your mum dying, it allowed the emotion to then come back with those memories, and then that flooded you? Was that?
absolutely right. Yes, that's exactly what happened. And it was quite overwhelming. And so initially writing those things as I remembered them was, look, when I first started, I was not sure I was going to be writing this for publication. That wasn't my initial impulse. I just needed to write it and make some form out of this formless, massive experience.
Because you've always kept a diary, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Right.
And actually that was really interesting because all the way through, more or less, I actually wrote how I was feeling first and what I remembered, and then I would go back and check what I'd written at the time. My diary writing has not been complete in the sense of I haven't written every single thing that's happened. I've written consistently, but a lot of the time I feel like shaking my younger self going, tell the other bits that are happening. But because I write by, you know, you write diaries by hand, I was able to, it's funny because my writing changes all the time and I can kind of feel how I was feeling at the time just by looking at the way that I was writing, and it was a memory jogger. And I did have to change some things actually because the way that I remembered them were not in the order, particularly was not how they happened. Yeah, but it gave a fullness, I guess, to the memory process that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't written diaries.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because when you, so almost like you did a brain dump of everything, of the memory. You just wrote it out. With the actual process of writing a memoir, did you just do that on your own, or did you get some help, or where did you go to find out how to write the memoir?
I got some help. So this was quite a serendipitous thing. So I have a friend, Lorraine, and so we're both fans of this US writer called Howard Norman. And so we've been reading his books for years and years. He's well known in the States, but he doesn't publish here. So she would order his books from the US or through the UK, and we'd read them. And so she was keeping up with what he was publishing and said, Julia, he is doing a memoir mentorship, and a paid one, but he's taking applications now. And I was just like, I can't possibly do that. Like the thought of somebody else reading what I was just terrifying. And she said, I think you should really do this. And what have you got to lose? So I talked to my partner, like, yep, go for it. So I plucked up all the courage I had and sent in a synopsis and a sample chapter, and this is why I would love to work with you. And he wrote the most amazing memoir called I Hate to Leave This Beautiful Place. And he too has had a series of very strange things happen to him in his life. And I thought, well, if anybody could do it, it would be him. And also, because he's in the States, he's completely separate. I didn't feel that there was anyone in Australia I would feel comfortable with sharing this material with. It was really important that he was from elsewhere and had a completely fresh eye on the work, didn't know me as a writer, didn't know anything. So I applied, and he accepted me as his non-US mentor for the year, and we went on from there. And he was saying, but you've published all these books. So the first thing he did was order all my books and read them, which was
wow.
And he's like, you know how to write. Why do you need me? I'm like, because I don't know how to write this. I don't know how to write a memoir. And his perspective was incredibly helpful. So
what did he say? What insights did he give you?
So he was really good at the structuring of things. He was really good. The most important thing he did was push me. So he would say, you've skimmed over all this thing, like it's saying, oh, and by the way, I got a PhD, and by the way, this happened. He's like, no. No. You can't just say, oh, I had a baby and then I had a PhD and then my husband got, spoiler alert, early onset Alzheimer's. You need to do this. And I'd written something at the beginning of a chapter about having got an extension for the house to create space between my husband and our daughter. And he's like, why? And so I had to go back and explain the why. And that was so hard to do. It was painful. I mean, I'm sure you can probably feel it reading that, but writing it was agonizingly difficult. And if he had and he's one of those people who can pull quotes out from everywhere. So he'd say, Ursula Le Guin went mad when she was writing her memoir, like everyone, this is a stage that happens to everyone who writes a proper memoir. So, because a lot of the time, so we would have Zoom meetings once a month, and sometimes I'd just be going, oh my God, what am I doing? I can't do this. There was a lot of that, and, wailing and gnashing of teeth. And he was so helpful, saying, this is really strong. You've got to do this. This is your project. There were things, for example, like writing down John's speech, and he had a very idiosyncratic way of speaking. And I was like, I can't capture that. And he said, but you're going to have to try. So I would go back to videos that we had and I would just write them down verbatim. I would take the cards that he'd written, the letters that he'd written, and all of those kinds of things, and recreate things in those ways. Plus, I did have excerpts in my diary, particularly once he started getting dementia, of the things that he said, and tried to recreate him that way. I still don't think I did justice to how, he was so funny. He was just so witty, and and that was unrecreatable, I think. But I hope I did an approximation.
I think you did, because even just explaining how the comparison between how witty he was and how he could hold a thing at a party and just everyone be engaged with him and go, oh wow, okay, what a fascinating person, and then contrasting that to what he was like at home as well, and especially with the early onset dementia. How old was he when he was 52?
He was, yes, 52 or 53 when he was diagnosed.
Yeah.
53, I think. But so he was in his 40s when he started really developing it. So by the time he was diagnosed, he didn't really know what he was being diagnosed with. Like he was kind of beyond So he was quite significantly down the path by that stage.
Yeah. So I want to ask you now, Julia, what self-care practices did you put into place? Because obviously you knew you were going to go into some really, really hard territory and really dig up some personal stuff and go into that and have to explore it and have to write it. What did you do to look after yourself for that process? Or did you even know you needed to?
Oh yeah, I did know I needed
Yeah,
to.
good.
Yes, I did. I had a psychologist at that point who was a different. I've got a different one now. I've actually got a memoir specific psychologist now. Like I literally got her to see me through this process.
Oh, that's good.
Which has been necessary. So I had one in the immediate aftermath of Mum dying. I had a yoga practice, a meditation practice, journaling. I had all the things that I possibly could in place to write it. When I first started writing it, I was sober, and I broke my sobriety actually during the writing process. Because some of it I had some other stuff that went on and I was just like, this is too hard. So I did start drinking again during some of it. And I'm back on the wagon now, but it was so I tried to put in all the things that I could. But nevertheless, it was really hard. So I guess if anybody's thinking of writing a memoir, I would, I suppose I would say to them, think really carefully about what you want from this process, because I think it was good for me actually just wanting initially that ordering of my life. And I kept on saying right up until the end, I don't need to publish this. This is not necessarily what I'm doing it for. I did want to write it as well as I could. So for me, I wanted to make the writing as beautiful as I could at the same time. So they were really my goals in the first event. And actually, when I finished what I was comfortable with as a first draft, I just sat on it for 6 months, and I just was like, I'm just going to leave it there and
let it mellow, let the whole thing process, and just let it. Yeah. And so, why did you get it published, knowing that you would have to go through all this again, like we're talking now? And I'm not. We're just talking about the writing process. We're not even talking about the content, you know. And that'll keep coming up. So why did you decide to get it published?
I decided to get it published because, well, a couple of reasons. One, I was really proud of, and am really proud of, the writing. I have done as a good a job with the writing of this as I could ever hope to do with anything. This is, it feels like my life's work. And because some of the things that I write about are things that people don't talk about in memoirs necessarily, I mean, sometimes they're in as one topic, like so memoirs that just have one topic in them, like mental illness, for example, or having an abusive husband, or or the other things. But I don't know of too many memoirs that have all of it in one place. And there are
there's a fair bit of stuff in there.
And one of the things that Howard Norman said to me in the writing, especially when we're getting to the really difficult stuff of, because I had to go through that. Why did I stay with my husband? Why did I do that? Why did I put my daughter through that? Why, And he said, what is it in you that survived your childhood that made you able to deal with that, and then with the stuff with my new partner, and what is it in you? And that was a really profound question, to find that through line and articulate it.
So what is that through line for you? Can you summarize it?
I mean, some of it is that the adaptive mechanisms I had when I was a child to dissociate, to be avoidant, also got me through those difficult things. But also my ability to want to communicate with people, to find connection with people, I think has been there as well. So I've always wanted to say to other people, this has been my experience. What's your experience been like? And I think I have always valued hugely my friendships and my connections with other people. And that has been a through line in my life. I have been so lucky with the people that I've had that have supported me, and whose friendship and love I have needed at critical times.
Yeah, because I know, because reading the memoir, you've had a lot of people who have dropped off or run away or disappeared, and for whatever reason, but to have that constant knowing that you're going to have some people there going to always be there is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is the thing that sustains me. I think if I did not have that, I'm not sure if it's, because I was an only child, I always really valued friendships. Like, other people have always been really important to me. And sometimes that's been to my detriment. So sometimes I've accepted behaviour from people that I shouldn't have, because I value the connection over almost anything else.
Yeah. Now, Julia, your daughter plays a significant role in this book. How did you facilitate her to be part of it? How did you get her buy-in? All that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm sure you can imagine from reading the events of the book, she's still struggling, and probably will for the rest of her life, with the things that have happened. And so I was very upfront with her about what I was writing, and I checked in with her. She hasn't read the whole thing. She doesn't want to yet. She will probably listen to it as an audiobook when it comes out as an audiobook.
Oh, Generation Z. Lazy.
But she has read the bits that concern her, and when, for example, I wrote about the dynamic between her and her dad, where she was always having to apologise for things, and I wrote the things that she had written in the paintings and cards that she'd done for her dad. She just said, "Thank you. It feels validating to have that out there," because it's been a very painful process for her, because, when she was a teenager, her dad had early onset Alzheimer's, and that's not something that other people were experiencing, except actually for one of her friends. But not only that, so that was one thing which was terrible and difficult, but then her coming to terms with, the relationship that she'd had with her dad, and how controlling he'd been of her, and, and her anger at me at letting it happen, and all of those things she's had to work through in the context of never being able to speak to him or have it out with him. And in my mind, I always thought that that their relationship they fiercely loved each other and they fiercely fought, and it was extreme. And I thought that she would bring it to him, you know, when she became a teenager, and she never got the chance to do that because his dementia was already obvious. Really, by the time she was in, I mean, he was diagnosed, was it the beginning, when she was at the beginning of year 11, 10, somewhere around there. Yeah. So she just never got the chance to do those things. So it's a hard road for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to that because because my mum, she, growing up was difficult anyway. However, she ended up having a few strokes, later in life,
Right.
and then was unable to communicate and talk properly. And
Wow.
so anything that I wanted to say to sort of, revisit the past or make amends or something like that, it just wouldn't have worked. I just couldn't. I've lost that ability because she can't speak properly to have
Yeah.
that open, honest conversation. So
Yes.
I can relate to that a little bit. So
Yeah.
what was
Yeah.
one of the biggest insights that you got out of writing the book?
I think reading it, because I didn't read it as an entire piece actually until I was proofing in
Yeah.
September. I nearly had enough nerves doing that. Oh dear God. I think because I had mental health issues as a teenager, I'd always had an image of myself as somehow being incapable of dealing with stuff.
Mm.
And reading it, I went, actually, I'm really resilient. That really surprised me.
Well, that's
And I
great.
guess I've known that in relation to isolated pockets of my life. It's actually, I survived that. And not only that, I have worked through, I mean, everyone is able to survive things because we're human, right? Most people don't turn their faces to the wall and stay in bed and whatever. Most people have to get up and deal every day with the stuff that happens to them, whether they like it or not. But to me, I am pleased that I have been able to, at the same time, reflect on what's happened and to try and make something of it. And again, I guess that comes back to being a writer. To me, it's really important to try and make something of what's happened. It's like it's like a hope that that other people will connect, and that my experiences might help somebody else feel less alone in theirs.
Yeah.
And and so that's what that's the main thing that I hope that the memoir will do for people, is give people hope in their own difficult stuff, whatever that stuff is.
Yeah, I can see how that could work, and I see how that could be a thing, definitely. Um, what's so you're gonna have people coming up to you now, Julia, going, "Oh, you've written a memoir. I've always wanted to write a memoir." What would your advice be?
If you really want to write a memoir, get some good therapy first.
I like that. Because I think, who was it, Holden Shepherd or someone had said something about write from your scars, not from your wounds.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And obviously, I'm still working through the things that have happened to me as well. It's not like this is a finished process, and I've done the best I can with the material I've got. If I wrote the memoir, another memoir in 10 years, it would look completely different to this. I hope I'd have a different perspective on things. This is a point in time thing, and I think with memoir, I I would hope that if people are writing, they're writing to discover who they are in the process of what's happened to them. And I think it's a really wonderful thing to do, no matter what you do with it, whether you publish it or not. However, I would also caution people that it is a tough thing to do. Some of it might be cathartic, but some of it also might be re-traumatizing, and to expect all of those things when you're writing. So I guess to go in it with clear eyes, knowing that it's not going to be an easy piece of writing just because you're writing what happened to you, and you know, it's still it's a challenging thing to do. But if you're clear about why you're doing it, I think it can be enormously rewarding.
Yep. Okay. Because that's advice for me as well. Because I actually wanted to write a memoir a little couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and I gave up. I went, nah, I'm not ready for it, because it was I was writing from the wounds, not the scars, and I haven't let them turn into scars yet. And then maybe I will, maybe I won't. See what happens. But I'm so glad that you wrote your memoir, Julia, because it's there's so many things in there that reflected back on what I've experienced as well. And it was like I wasn't alone in that. And that was fantastic to read that. So one last question that I'm ask all my guests. Julia, what lights you up?
My relationships.
Yep.
My connections with other people, 100%.
Yeah, that's good. Because without other people, we're just going to be lost, aren't we? We really are.
That's other people are the meaning of life.
I love that.
Of mine, anyway.
Julia Lawrinson.
I say this as an introvert too. So
okay, that's good. That's an interesting point there, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Julia Lawrinson, thank you so much for being on my show. Where can people get a copy of your book, How to Avoid a Happy Life? From your website or from Fremantle Press?
From Fremantle Press, from your local bookstore, and from your local library as well. You can request it. You don't have to buy it if that's too hard for you. Request it from your local library. Go in and support your libraries.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me.